So for me, I grew up in a house where I was to be seen and not heard. And that was a definite theme that you could feel in my life. And my opinions, my thoughts, not only were they maybe not valued, but they actually were not invited. And so I learned to hide. I learned to stay quiet. I learned to shrink back. Because if I were to speak up and tell my opinions or my thoughts, it would make life difficult for me. So I became a peacemaker. And a peacemaker just stayed quiet and did as I was told. Well, I have to tell you that every day for me, even as an adult, those patterns have continued. And every day I have to make a choice if I'm gonna let my opinions and my voice be heard. And if I didn't do that, I can tell you I would not be standing up on this stage talking with you this morning. There's no way, because that goes against my core scripts that tell me you are not valued, you are to be seen and not to be heard. And I remember one particular time, it was about 9 years ago, I heard about a church in Phoenix, and they were gonna go out on the streets, and they were going to just meet people and just talk to people, meet them where they were in life. They had worked with some homeless organizations, and they'd worked with a few different places for us to just go and just talk to people. And I thought, that is so cool, because for a minute I forgot who I was. And I thought, I wanna go do that. And it was 14 days. So you went for 2 weeks and you just got to go and just meet people and hear their stories and just talk with them and just share the love of Christ with them. And so I thought, I totally want to do this. And I was really, really excited. And so I remember I went down there, and the first day they had us break up into groups. Now, have you ever been around people who just seem to have it all together? And every insecurity you've ever had suddenly bubbles up inside of you? Well, that's what happened to me. And I remember the group that I was with, it was so natural for them. They could walk up to a bus stop and just start talking to someone. And it was so much love. I loved how this particular group, how they went out and just loved on people and just met them and heard their stories. And as I was watching them do this, all I kept hearing, I was that little girl and I was paralyzed in fear. And all I kept hearing was, you can't do this. You should be seen and not heard. You are to stand with them but not participate. I just kept feeling this feeling of, I don't belong here. And so that first day that we'd gone out, I did stand back, and I heard the most amazing stories. Guys, I heard one of the ladies in our team, on our group, she met another woman, and she began to open up about how she was abused as a child. And the woman she was talking to said, me too. That's my story. And both of them, I watched both of them come out of hiding in that moment safely together. And it was beautiful. I watched as another woman at a bus stop walked up to a stranger and started talking to them. And all of a sudden the lady began telling us that she was addicted to meth and that she was really struggling, that she couldn't see life outside of meth. And a lady out of our group stepped up, and she said, that's my story. She said, I struggled with meth years ago, and she said, I'm here to tell you there is another side to this. You guys, it was amazing. It was amazing to watch as handshakes became hugs, and as stories were shared, and as people who started as complete strangers walked away as friends. It was an amazing thing to be a part of, and it was beautiful, but in the midst of all of that beauty, I found myself hiding. I was terrified to talk to anyone. And so I remember the drive back home that night, I thought, please don't let anybody ask me how my night went. Don't let anybody ask me, please just let me go back and go to sleep. And tomorrow, I'm going home. This is not for me. And so that night, I called my friend, and she was helping us watch our kids. I had 2 kids, and I left for 2 weeks to go do something that I really hated doing on day 1. And that was great. And so I called my friend who was watching our kids that day, and I said, you know what, I'm coming home. I said, I am done with this. This is not for me. I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. I'm uncomfortable. I just need to come home. Being the good friend that she was, her response back to me was, tomorrow, you are gonna get up in the morning, and you are gonna put your big girl boots on, and you are gonna go out there and you're gonna do it again. And I was like, oh. And she said, Denisha, maybe part of you going on this trip is about you stepping out of your comfort zone. Have you ever known that you really needed to hear something, but like loved and hated the person all in the same moment? Because that's how I felt. I was like, oh, yes, she's right, but this is not what I want to do. So I held on to that, and her boldness made me a little bit bolder. But then I still thought, yeah, but tomorrow night I'm probably going to go home. Hopefully, like, she'll give me my kids back, And the next morning I got up, and I woke up in an unfamiliar bed in an unfamiliar house. And did I mention I did not know one person on this trip? I went with complete strangers. And I woke up that morning, went downstairs, and they had tables set up, and they said, today we're going to go to the mall, and here's some things we're going to do. And so we have jewelry, and I thought, I was a jeweler. I've got this. I can rock jewelry. That's something that I know. And so I thought, I'm going to go and I'm going to make some jewelry, and we'll take it out and encourage people. How hard can that be? That's awesome. I can do this. So I sat at the table, and before picking my bracelet, I looked to see what everybody else was doing, because all my insecurities were bubbling up. And I saw people making bracelets. They had blocks with letters on them. And then they had like rose beads and like pretty things that you could put with it. And I looked, and people are making bracelets with the words like faith, hope, love on them. And I thought, piece of cake, I got this. So I walked over and I stood there and I thought, what word should I make? And the word erased popped into my head. I thought, what a dumb word. That's not encouraging. And so I stood there for a little bit longer, and I thought, oh, faith, and no. And I couldn't shake it. And so I thought, all right, fine. I'm going to make this bracelet. So I grabbed an E and an R, A-S-E-D, and I held them, and I went to grab a bracelet, and they had women's sizes and men's sizes, and I grabbed the women's one, and I put it back down, and I grabbed this really long one, and I wasn't sure if it was a necklace or a bracelet, and I threaded my word erased on it. And I was so discouraged by this thought, and that I was trying to just follow my gut, and I thought it was so dumb, and that's why I'm terrible at this, and I need to go home tonight, that I didn't even put anything pretty on it. Like, there was no added, it was just the word erased on a beaded chain. And so I put it together, and I didn't have pockets, so I thought, oh, I'll put it on my wrist, and it fell off. So I put it back on, and I twisted it through my bracelet. And we went and we drove to the local mall. And as we were driving, I thought, this is so crazy. She's my friend, I need to just go home. And I thought, I will sit in the car, and I'll pray for them as they go in. That's what I'll do. And then I realized it was 115 degrees outside, and that was probably a really poor choice. So I thought, fine, kicking and screaming a little bit, but nobody around me. I just seemed very composed because I was hiding in my own insecurities completely. I walked into the mall, and I'm walking down, and I happen to notice this man sitting on a bench. And this man was about the size, I can imagine, of Arnold Schwarzenegger, okay? This guy had to be like a bodybuilder or a pro football player or something, and he's sitting on this bench, and I went to walk past him, and I thought, I just had noticed him. He was just unusually big for muscular. He was just huge, and I thought, I wonder if he's a celebrity, And so I walked by, and all of a sudden I get a few feet from him, and just popped into my head again this thought, that's the man for the bracelet. And I grabbed the bracelet, and I thought, oh, no. And I sat there for a second. Oh, no, not him. Like, give me somebody really friendly and peppy or something. This man's just sitting there. And I thought, okay, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do this. I'm going home tonight. What do I have to lose? And so I just went and I sat down beside the guy. And I sat there, and if I'm totally honest, I thought, please leave, please leave, please leave. He didn't leave. And so I looked over at him, and with every amount of courage I could possibly muster up from my toes, I turned to him and I said, if I had something that I thought would encourage you, would you want it? And I thought he's gonna say, no, crazy lady, go, right? He didn't. He looked at me in the softest voice, and he said, yeah, I would. And I thought, oh no. And so I sat there for a split second, and I am an overthinker. I overthink everything, okay? And I sat there, and I thought, okay. And I turned to him, and I thought, I have absolutely nothing to say to this man. And out of my mouth falls the following words. Your past has been erased. All things old are passed away. You are a new creation in Christ, and there is something that you are holding against yourself that the Lord wants you to know that he has forgiven you for, and he wants to restore you. I think I was shocked. Ashley was shocked. We both didn't know what to do in this moment. It was such an awkward moment because I'm thinking, is he gonna yell at me? What's gonna happen? And I looked into his eyes, and he began to cry. And I thought, I'm not sure if this is good or bad right now. And I sat there, and there was so much tension in that moment. And that was the moment that I met Ashley. And Ashley began to tell me his story, that he got called into his boss's office and that he got told that he no longer had a job, that his boss was firing him because his boss had found out something about his past. And he was really struggling, and he was hiding. He was hiding from people. He was hiding from God in that moment. And I was shocked. I was so shocked. My eyes began to fill up with tears. He's crying, and he goes, I can't believe this. And I was like, me neither. And I looked down, and I saw the bracelet, and I thought, oh yeah, the bracelet. And so I said, hey, I made you this bracelet. And I said, can I give it to you? And he just did this. And I put the bracelet on his wrist, and you know what? It fit him perfectly. And this guy had huge wrists. It fit him perfectly. And suddenly I flashed back to the moment that morning when I was standing at the jewelry table, and I picked up the smaller chain and I dropped it, and I picked up the bigger one and threaded my word with an attitude. And here I was sitting with this guy, and I was clasping this bracelet on his wrist, and all of a sudden this woman, beautiful woman, and these two boys walk up to us. And I've never let go of a man's wrist faster in my entire life as I did in this moment. I mean, it was like hot potato right there. And I stood up and I introduced myself, and I thought, please don't hit me. Like, this woman just walked up, and I was like touching her husband's hand, you know? And I said, Ashley, is it okay if I tell her what happened? And he said, absolutely, absolutely. And I said, okay. So I told his wife what happened, and she said, did he tell you? Did he tell you that he just lost his job because his boss found out about his past? And I said, yeah, he did. And it was the most incredible moment with them. And see, just as Jesus met the woman at the well in the middle of her brokenness, in the middle of her shame, God met Ashley in his moment of shame and rejection right there in the middle of them all. And so I said to he and his wife, I said, you know what I think is really funny? I said, God's pursuing you. And it just hit me what had happened that day, and just from the 7 o'clock in the morning on up. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, I know how crazy this whole thing is right now. And I said, I'm just as shocked as you are. But I said, what were you doing at 7 o'clock this morning? He said, well, I was sleeping. And I said, okay. I said, at 7 o'clock this morning, I was standing in front of a table looking at a bunch of letters and trying to decide what I was going to make as a bracelet. And I said, and the word erase just popped into my head at 7 o'clock this morning. And I said, I find it interesting that God knew at 11 o'clock that you would be sitting on this bench in this mall by that entrance where I walked in, and I would just happen to pass by. I said, do you not see the hand of God pursuing you in such a beautiful way? And they both began to cry. And I was just like, this is the coolest thing ever. That our God is amazing at how he meets us right where we are. And so I asked Ashley, I said, Ashley, I want to ask you if you would take a courageous step with me. And I said, I'd like to know, would you like to begin a relationship with the God who pursues you like that? And he was just teary-eyed, and he said, I would. And so we talked about Jesus. We talked about the gift that God gave us of Christ. We talked about that all of our sins are forgiven and that we can walk in relationship with him. And then I said, I'm gonna ask you to take a courageous a step of faith and pray with me right now. And he said, yes, I want this. And I said to his wife, I said, would you like to join us? Would you like to begin a relationship with Christ? And she said, yes. And right there in the middle of the mall, we all held hands. I held Ashley's hand and his wife's hand, and they held hands with their little boys. And both of them prayed to begin a relationship with Christ. And it was an amazing moment. We hugged, and I walked away, and I remember going behind this kiosk and just kind of sinking into it and just crying. Because I got to witness God meeting him where he was hiding. He was being pursued by a God that he didn't know, that he didn't even know that a relationship with him was possible, and yet he pursued him. And I got to be a part of that because you see, God found me in my hiding place too. Because I was hearing, your voice is not, you can't use your voice. You're to be seen and not heard. You should not step out. And yet I stepped out and I watched God do an amazing thing in the life of a beautiful family. And no matter how good we are at hiding, I think God is better at finding us.